everybody, and welcome to another episode with me, Sheena Williams from Krav Maga Salem and the Art of Badass. I am joined today by the infamous Greg Nelson, legendary mixed martial arts and UFC coach, special forces instructor, expert in a wide variety of martial arts and combat sports, owner, of course, of the Academy in Minnesota, head instructor there, and of course, two-time cancer survivor. We're going to talk a little bit about his story and all the great things he's added to the martial arts community. So, Greg, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on to chat with me a little bit.
It's going to be a fun time. Thank you for having me.
How's the weather out there right now?
It is absolutely beautiful outside. It's sunny, in the 70s, not a cloud in the sky right now, or maybe a few, but it's beautiful.
You know, I keep hearing that it's really beautiful in the summer, but Todd Fossey only seems to have me out in the winter. I think there's something to that.
It's a different world, winter and summer.
Well, I want to dive right into this and start asking you some questions. Like I told you earlier, I want to be respectful of your time. I did my best to whittle down my notebook of lifelong questions that I've had for you to just 4 pages. So we'll do our best to keep it limited. So you obviously run the Academy, which you started in 1992. What did your average day look like pre-COVID, and what does it look like now?
Okay, pre-COVID, pretty much I would get up. I get up around 7 in the morning usually, and I have a pretty steady routine every single morning. It's like ding, 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 have my routine going. And once I usually get to the Academy around 9:45, 9:30 in the morning, and I would teach jiu-jitsu at first. That's my on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'd be doing more wrestling type stuff. And then right after that class, I go into MMA training, and then we have our competitors, and we have different focuses on each day. And then after that, we may have some individual training, some different types of training, or I would go home, and then I would study for the next bunch of classes, or I would get some different training in, or just researching or writing, just kind of trying to keep busy. And then I get back to the Academy, or depends on the time of the year, because I also coach wrestling, so I'm a high school wrestling coach, and so that would usually take up my afternoons. Then I would run to wrestling practice at around 2:30, and then stay until 5:30, and then I'd run back to the Academy and teach from 5:30 to 9:30 at night. And
I feel like having you as a high school wrestling coach is a serious unfair advantage.
It's pretty fun because I started initially just because my son was wrestling. He started wrestling as a little kid, and I was always working with him and the kids that he was with. And then when he got into 7th grade, as a 7th grader, he was wrestling varsity for the high school. And so eventually the head coach said, "Hey, would you like to help out and just coach?" I said, "Yeah, it'd be great." And once my son was done wrestling, I just stayed on because it's just fun working with the kids. And it's one of those high schools that is very diverse, not the wealthiest. So they don't get the cool stuff. They don't get the good money. All right. So we had taken that program. The head coach is absolutely he went to that high school and is absolutely passionate about it. So it's great. And he'll allow me to coach where I'm really comfortable and love to coach. And then he'll always be picking my brain, and I'll be watching and taking cues from him. So it's a really good relationship. But we've taken that program when my son was there, he was like really maybe the only one that would place in tournaments. And this last sectional tournament we had out of 14 weight classes, we had 10 medalists. And so it's like we turned that whole program around. And now people and coaches from all sorts of programs are like, "What are you guys doing?" Because we also have a huge team. And so it's been great. It's really been the head coach that's what he does. He's wrestling and he lives wrestling, and I get to come in and just do wrestling, which I love to do. And so it's a blast. So to me, it's all the same. It's all martial art.
Oh yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier in your kind of pre-COVID routine that you would come home and spend some time studying. I mean, with somebody with as much longevity as you have, within the world, what is it that is currently fueling you to continue to study? I mean, are you learning anything new or just reviewing the things you've learned in the past?
Always learning new. I mean, that's just the beauty of the martial arts. It's kind of a never-ending quest, right? And I also looking at, we have a specific curriculum, right, that we use in both our Thai boxing classes and then our jiu-jitsu classes. And so I'm looking at the curriculum, and then I'll say, okay, this is the throw that we're working. It may not be the throw that I love to do, but I'm going to find out everything I can to train that throw, all the different training drills, all the different ways to set it up, all the different secondary, tertiary techniques you can get off of it. So I'm constantly studying that. So for me, it's like a constant journey of learning. And I learned that from Guru Inosanto. He is this, all of a sudden he comes up with, here's this new martial art I found. It's like, there he is, he's 80, and he's in his 80s, he's still learning, still doing stuff. So that was the example. And, there's so many ways to look at even a very base level technique. And then when you start researching different training methods and taking training methods from one art and totally bringing it over to another art and modifying it to fit those techniques, it's just a kind of endless study.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've seen it in your time where you have people who kind of hang their hat on one style or one technique or one thing that they've built up over time. Dan Inosanto, you are another perfect example of never stopping, continual motion forward and continual education. And I think it sets a really strong precedent for newer instructors and developing instructors, because I feel like the world of martial arts in the best way is getting bigger, where things are starting to kind of merge in new places. And I think you are definitely on the forefront of that.
Well, I love it. It's one of the things that when I first started getting into the martial arts that I'm doing, the Filipino martial arts, the Junfan martial arts, that was really, I met Sifu Rick Fay in 1983. And, he's he's the same way. He's constantly researching it, once again, coming from the Inosanto lineage. And so it's nonstop. And so we were continually training, making up training drills. And I assumed that a lot of other people were kind of doing the same thing. And so I'd go to really well-known academies and I'd say, okay, we're just going to warm up with our XYZ round, which we thought was normal. And they don't do it. They don't do this stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So, it started from the very beginning. And I think also coming from a gymnastics background where you're constantly, trying to strive to learn new skills and pick up. And then once you get a skill, you got to continue to try to hone it and get it as perfect as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you get that skill so you can perform it pretty well, then you're off to the next skill and see how you can add it onto that one. And it's just a total process of fail, fall, fail, fall, fail, fall, crash, fall, finally get it, start to refine it, and then you pick it up, and then you start the process all over again. And
absolutely. And just continuing to build on it and layering it. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
So as somebody who's been in, the combat sports and martial arts world for so long, with just all the different unique styles that you've seen, you've seen so much. What would you say is some of the biggest changes that you've seen in mixed martial arts, say, over the last 15 years?
Well, I would have to say that right now, over the last 15 years, when we first got into it, there were still, people that were in single arts that could still perform at a pretty high level. You could come in as a really great striker and still do pretty decent, right?
Yeah.
As long as you didn't get taken down and get to a really precarious position. And vice versa, you could be just a straight up jiu-jitsu guy and do pretty well and not have that great of striking, right?
Yeah.
No more.
Mm-mm.
No more. Now it's no longer style against style. It's really hybrid fighter against hybrid fighter. Who's trained? And it's funny because obviously you have some big camps around there, but you also have some of the top fighters that come from just very small areas and pockets from around the globe.
Yeah.
And because it comes down to the individual and how they are going to take what everybody else knows and work it and get around the people that are going to allow them to grow and push them and pull out everything they have. And obviously having that individual drive to just persevere and push through and work whatever you got to do and put it on the line and learn and grow. So many people have been doing that it's taken the art and just continually bring it up to another level and another level. But I always tell people, I said, watch, probably the last 10 years of UFCs and save a few anomalies. What's the newest punches that we've learned? What's the newest kicks we've learned? What's the newest grappling stuff? Where's the newest ground and pound? I mean, it's still there. It's like, has there been a new punch invented in boxing? New strikes invented in Muay Thai? Even new takedowns and things invented in wrestling? Not really. Yeah. Same stuff, but training methods have changed. And now there's more of a blend even across these very strict sports like wrestling. You're seeing elements of submission wrestling and jiu-jitsu slip in there. And definitely you're seeing a lot of wrestling come over now to the jiu-jitsu world.
Yeah.
And they're all benefiting from each other.
Absolutely.
So that's where I would have to say the biggest change has been is that all these arts are now looking to one another and then working with one another individually and collectively to just elevate the sport.
Yeah. And I think that the team element of it has kind of changed things. I mean, getting into these fight camps and building each other up and working together and finding great coaches like yourself. I mean, the focus on that for so many has been highlighted more. And I think that's important for people to recognize too. Sometimes we look at a fighter and think, oh, they're such a great fighter, but we forget they've got an entire camp. They've got an entire set of coaches who do all sorts of different things. And it's such an important aspect. I talk to people all the time about, just what the cut guys do in wrapping hands and how important and how much that can change a fight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Break your hand.
There's more to it than just the fighters. There's a lot that goes into it. And, sometimes you get the people who walk in the street, oh, okay, I'm going to be a fighter at, 42 and 40 pounds overweight. And it's like, well, okay. There's a lot more to it than just jumping rope, buddy.
How about you try out our fundamental jiu-jitsu class?
Yes.
And then they realize, you know what? I don't want to be a fighter.
Yeah, maybe I'll go do something safer like be an accountant.
Yeah. And the big thing too is the teammates are such a big thing. For me, it's about having that group of guys that really are willing to be there for each other, motivate each other, call each other when one doesn't show up, keep each other accountable, watch out for each other. When one's getting closer to a fight, each guy realizes because they're competitors that guy has to lower his percentage of getting injured.
Yeah.
So you have to work with them. Plus they're cutting weight, so things are going to be a little bit different. And so that's a huge thing. And for me, when somebody or some person on the team is starting to wreck that vibe, they either gotta figure it out or they're gone. And I gave people the boot. I said, dude, you're not fitting into the groove here. You got to go.
Add value or get out.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So on that note, I mean, obviously your students have gone on to win things like UFC fights and titles and Strikeforce titles. And you even had a student over in Japan win a shoot boxing championship. I mean, as you're developing these students, I mean, what is it that you really look for and consider when you're considering somebody for your fight teams?
A lot of them, in the Midwest, we have a very strong wrestling base, right? So
yes.
You get a guy come in who's he's never done mixed martial arts, but they have literally hundreds and hundreds of wrestling matches. That counts for a lot.
Yeah.
They know how to cut weight. They're tough. They have a huge, huge part of the game taken care of. And it's much easier to take a person like that and mold them into a fighter than to take somebody who's a really good striker and then turn them into a great fighter. you can do it for sure. It's done, and we have done it. All right. And people who have come from striking backgrounds have become great fighters. UFC champions too, like Rose Namajunas, right? So you have that type of thing, but having that background, it's very easy when someone comes in from a Division I college and says, "Hey, I want to fight." It's like, there you go. Here's the team, and then we just start showing them strikes because they are at such a level. Because people don't understand the level of a D1 wrestler, an athlete who's competitively wrestled all 4 years or even a couple years, but we've had multiple time All-Americans come in, and that's at another level. That's top 8 in the whole country. So now you get that guy walking into your room, and it's like, yeah, there it is. We'll put the other pieces in, right? So that's a pretty easy fix. Now, if you have somebody come in that has, who's coming from the regular classes, because we have people that have started out just in classroom, and then they start getting better, they start enjoying it, then they want to make a jump into the fight scene. It's like, okay, that's a little different because they don't have that competitive background. They haven't felt the pressure, getting smashed and banged and having to cut weight. And so that's a little bit slower of a process, and I'm a little bit more selective there. And then it's going to be, okay, here's the deal. You're on a team, and right now you might be cannon fodder, but that's just the way it is. Not that we're going to treat you like that, but you got to show that you're able to take the heat, because these guys have been taking it for years, getting pounded on by wrestlers that are above them, and that's just the process. Someone who's better than you hammers on you until you equal it up, or they leave and you hammer on the people below you.
Yep.
So that's kind of a process that happens.
Pecking order.
Exactly. Because for me and everybody who fights, you got to take it serious, because you can go in there and get really messed up really fast. I've had fighters break their orbitals and face plates and have brain swelling and break their jaws and get teeth knocked out, broken ribs, broken legs. I've had, a lot of stitches. That's just normal. We just glue them shut in training a lot of times. But, it's a brutal sport, because the whole goal is to take the person and render them unconscious or force them to submit because you're going to break something.
Yeah.
And
not a tickle fight, folks.
No. So you got to be very a different character.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, you've taken just notable fighters. Sean Sherk, Brock Lesnar, most recently, obviously, Thug Rose. You've taken some of these huge names, and like you said, you've taken people who maybe haven't had a competitive sport and got them into competition, and just, brought these people and elevated them up from their skill set, from their base skill set to no skill set, into these notable fighters. Do you have a favorite success story that you like to share with people?
I think for me, Sean Sherk is one of the ones, because a lot of people don't. He had a really rough, upbringing, as far as just family tragedy, and he wasn't like this. He was a good wrestler for sure in high school. Got 3rd place once in the state, and I think placed 4th. But I think his junior year, he quit wrestling, didn't want to do it, and was really, crazy partying and doing all that stuff and just living the life, right? And same as all the other guys, he saw the freaking UFC and watched Royce and was like, wow. And he came in, and he was just a really good wrestler. And here was a guy that when he started out, there was no weight class under 170.
Yeah.
And he's not a big guy, right? So he had to, he was doing everything he could to, he fought all bigger guys.
Yeah.
And that was the way it was. And he came from just a guy, and at that point in time, our gym was very small. It was maybe a 20-foot by 30-foot. And when he first started, we had just regular fold-out mats, and then eventually we got zebra mats, and then it was like, wow, we're famous. This is great. Look at this floor, right? And he was there when we were putting holes through the wall and putting plywood against the wall with vinyl over it, like that's a pad. And so he never, think about this, Sean Sherk coming up in all those fights, never trained in a ring, never trained in a cage. He trained in a gym on mats surrounded by walls. And that was it, right? And so he was just one of those guys that was so focused and driven, and a product of the classroom, because he would train with regular students and he didn't care as long as they could hold pads, as long as they, knew how to drill. I'd look over and there'd be a person who's whatever, like a white belt, just beginning, got shot in an arm bar, and he's like, yeah, that's it, you got it, good. He didn't care because he knew he could smash the person, right? And so he had such a different attitude. And so to see him rise up and even at the time, remember when he first started, when he fought Matt Hughes at 170, after that he was basically cut from the UFC because it was like he's the number 2 guy in the but they didn't want 2 dominant wrestlers, and they were both under Monty Cox at the time, so there was some rule that you couldn't be managed by the same manager and then fight. And so, and plus, people, you got to know that when they were fighting back then, it was not for money because there was no money. The Tough Show hadn't come around yet. I mean, you got to go and nothing like it is now. In fact, I tell people when Sean fought his first 8-man tournament in a day, we paid $85 and drove down to Iowa and got ourselves a hotel. And that's what it is. So we spent a lot of money driving down there to fight 3 guys in one day in the afternoon sun in some nightclub bar. And that's how it was. And but that's where Matt Hughes started out, and Rich Franklin and Jens Pulvers and all these famous fighters started out in those small circuits, and it shows that Monty Cox was putting on back in the Extreme Challenge. So it was wasn't like now where you can get these giant shows and you're getting paid right away and as a pro. Yeah, so he's by far probably my favorite story, just because of what he endured, and then he left. Was basically gone for a year because there's no money, and he went back to putting in hardwood floors and working, and then the Tough Show came, and he went, these guys are getting paid, I'm coming back. And then that was the second run where he took off. And then there was a 155-pound weight class.
Yep, so, which he did well in.
Yeah, so that was, ultimately, of all the fights, which was 40-some fights, his losses are George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, BJ Penn, and Frankie, is it Edgar? From when he lost for another title, only lost to champions.
Yeah,
that was it.
Nothing to hang your head over for sure.
No, and there were some good, really competitive fights. I mean, the fight with Matt Hughes was a very competitive fight.
Yes, it was. I've got a story to share with you here in a little bit. I've got a question that kind of ties into it specifically about that fight, but I'm very eager and excited you brought that up. I can't wait to talk to you about it a little bit more.
Awesome.
My next question for you is a little bit in depth, so I had to write it down in order to get it just right. On the Strenuous Life podcast, episode 253, for those of you who are looking, you spoke about kind of the basics and fundamentals being a key component of the training strategy you use with fight camps. Yet, your training strategy, you're not afraid to think and train outside the box, as proven by your vast skill set and instructor certifications. I mean, you're an instructor in everything. You train in everything. Can you speak a little bit more to finding balance between the rigidity of focus training and the fluidity and flexibility that come from martial arts not often seen in mixed martial arts?
Yeah, so I think you have to have a real solid fundamental skill base in wrestling, striking. For us, it's predominantly Muay Thai and boxing, right? That we kind of fundamentally drill in. And then obviously your jiu-jitsu, your submission skills, would be it gi or no gi.
Yeah.
So with that, you have to have certain skills that are hardwired into your game plan. So you don't have to think about them anymore. And once you have that set of base level skills hardwired into your body, now we can start to take whatever, because now you can always go back to that base and that foundation. The other thing is you can't teach like a cookie cutter method with fighters. The reason is they're all different.
Yeah.
They have different body types, different attributes, different psychologies, everything. So you can't just say, okay, you're going to fight like this, and the guy's like more a counter fighter because that's the way he operates. So then you got another fighter who's a super offensive, aggressive, really conditioned fighter. It's like that's two different guys training in the same camp, working with each other. And so you'd have to take that element and say, okay, because this guy's more of a lanky, maybe a counter-based fighter, maybe not as fast and explosive as the other person, we're going to now draw from these different arts because they're going to allow him to cultivate his skill level and his attributes and they fit his psychology, So then you got another guy who might be like Sean was very simplistic in his training method. He was a creature of habit and was not afraid to do things a million times. He wrestled since he was 5, but he never stopped developing that double leg takedown. But then he started adding it with different strikes and different from the clinch and how to seamlessly blend it together. And so, people couldn't tell when he was going to shoot because everybody knew he was going to shoot. But it was a matter of trying to stop it. That was the problem. Yeah. And then when he was on top, he was so good at not being caught in anything inside the guard, and he was very good at passing the guard. But he only had a few passes that he drilled over and over. The only problem is you had to stop him. And then if he was stuck in the guard, well, then you had to stop him from being able to smash you from inside the guard because he had little short arms that were super fast and strong. So it was very tough to catch him, and he had no neck, so it was almost impossible to choke. So you have that type of guy, he's going to be able to take a pretty simple game and just take it a very, a long ways, right? Yeah. And he was a great boxer, and nobody really knew that until the Nick Diaz fight, where he had troubles taking him down because Nick Diaz was ready for the takedown and crouched over. And in the second round, I remember him coming up going, yeah, I'm having real trouble, taking him down. He's crouched over. I said, yeah, he's as tall as you now. Start boxing. And Sean came out there and just started throwing his hands. Not that they were something that was going to knock out Nick Diaz because that was almost like an impossibility anyways. But it was enough he was like swatting the flies so then he could get to his takedown. And people were like, oh, my gosh, Sean sure can box. I go, yeah, he's been able to box for years. He just
hasn't needed to.
Used it so sporadically because he was about getting the person down on the ground.
Yeah, playing to the strengths too. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Excellent.
So taking those different things from all these different arts and finding how, and even to modify a training method so it fits a fighter, I think is really key.
I think it's an art.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about your son and getting him started at about, I think it was age 6, he started getting interested in martial arts and all that kind of stuff. You have a unique perspective. I mean, as a wrestling coach, as his wrestling coach, as a coach who's built up fighters and martial artists. I mean, do you have any advice or tips that you give to parents for, who have kids who are interested in competing in some sort of martial art?
It doesn't matter if it's martial art or wrestling, whatever it is, it's got to be fun. It's got to be fun, right? If it's not fun, the kid's not going to want to be there. Doesn't want to be there. Doesn't matter how much you want him to excel. Doesn't matter, right? So once he and my son, he was my daughter and son both grew up on the mat, right? Because
of course
he grew up on the gym, so they saw it. But because at that point in time, the academy run, we started our kids at 5. So I said, well, Gunnar, you can't start doing the kids class until you're 5. Doesn't matter because I don't know how many parents. Yeah, my son is just the most athletic. He's a 4. I think it's like he's 4. All right.
Yeah.
I think it's 5. So we try to. Now we have kids we have younger classes, but it's a different class, right?
Yeah, very much.
And that was something that he would just watch. But the thing is, he's growing up watching people like Sean Shirk and Dave Monet and Brock Larson and these guys going, and he's just walking in between on the mats and just grappling and stuff is flying around. He's just like somehow navigating his way through it. He's a little kid, and the guys just kind of knew. He knows what's going on, and so he was having fun with that. And then I would play with him a lot. and I never mentioned the word wrestling, even though I was teaching them all these wrestling drills. And this is a funny thing, because I remember one of the coaches, he was a coach for the University of Minnesota at the time, and also the head coach when we were with Brock, Marty Morgan. He was like, hey, Greg, you think Gunnar would like to try this summer wrestling thing? It's like a 3-day little mini camp. I said, I'll ask him. I said, Gunnar, want to do this 3-day wrestling camp? No, I don't want to do it. And I go, well, let's just try it. If you don't really like it, then we'll know. Because he was skateboarding at the time, and he was doing gymnastics and skateboarding, and in the gym doing martial arts, and so I go, but Gunnar, since I don't know if you're going to like it, I'm not going to buy any shoes. So you're going to have to do it in your socks or whatever. But the whole time when he was growing up, I was doing things, I call it like leg tag. I try to slap his leg, and he'd pull his leg out of the way and down block and all this stuff. He was learning wrestling. He never knew it. Yep. So he went in there, and he did really well. Again, and people are like, where did he wrestle? I go, never have. We've just been playing. And all of a sudden after that first day, he goes, Dad, I like wrestling. And so he started wrestling at that point, and he did really well, and he was very competitive, and he was kind of hard on himself because he didn't like to lose. He was like one of those, and he didn't lose very much, but when he did, he was like, and I go, well, hey, that's part of the deal. And I kind of have these things because, wrestling in Minnesota is very competitive.
Yeah.
And none of these kids that are wrestling at the highest level want to lose. So they're going to, and it's the same kids you're wrestling from like 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, all the way to high school. And some of them maybe grow a little bit more than the others, but it becomes very competitive. You know all of their names, and you wrestle on little junior teams in the different parts of the country with them. And so he would, if you would lose a match or like at a state tournament and he wanted to win, and I go, well, what's the best you can get now? And he goes, third. I go, yeah, third. Think about this. Now you get to wrestle 6 more times in the wrestleback to get third. And I said the toughest wrestlers are made in the wrestlebacks, because if you were in the first or second match, you would get 1 match, 2 match, 3 match finals, 4.
Yeah.
Now you got 1 match, 2 match loss. Now you got 6 more to get up to that. You get 6, and if you get third, you end on a win. If you get second, you end your season on a loss. So we want, and so, okay, so he'd wrestle and, did well. And, really competitive, really tough matches, but, he when he loved it, he loved it, and that was a key part. And he worked hard, he had that example of seeing people.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for those first few years of just watching. I have that same experience with my daughter on the mat. She likes to go running through, and she's jumped. We've got some really big guys who train with us, and we do a catch wrestling class, and she will full on just dive on them while they're in the middle of trying to do something, and she's trying to choke them out from behind. Yeah. And I'm like, could you get off the student? What do you do? But yeah. I have no doubt, and when it comes time for her to be a little older, she's gonna have no problem choking anybody out. Yeah. My daughter was she used to compete in the submission wrestling tournaments, but she was pretty much a full-time gymnast. Wow.
Grew up in the gym, but then when she started gymnastics and getting very competitive at that, then she was practicing probably 20, 25 hours a week in gymnastics. And she went up to, level 10 and was a, nationally competitive gymnast. And, but I'd go up until she was about 14. I'd go, Nina, got the submission hunt coming up. You should probably take at least 1 jiu-jitsu class before you do it. She goes, okay. So she'd do a class, and then she'd go and usually either do really well and win it, or she always lost if she did lose to another kid that was a son of one of the other school owners that did it full time. And they go, wow, Nina's really training. I go, yeah, she's training. Gymnastics, but not, but she was, grew up on the mat doing it. And
of course, yeah.
Very competitive gymnast, so you're strong and you're agile. And so.
Yeah, so basically your family's just a plain, boring, regular old family sitting on the couch watching movies, right? Never on the go?
Yeah. Always running around doing something there.